What are the best and worst matchups for your quarterbacks and running backs here in Week 16? How do we look at the rankings and what are our recommendations for start and sit? It's time to break it down right here and right now as we get another matchup Wednesday on Locked On Fantasy Football.
Are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer, and when I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com. We're here. It's another matchup Wednesday. We do have to navigate through another key injury here at quarterback. So we'll look at the quarterback and running back rankings as well as start-sits with the tougher decisions you might have to make at those positions here in Week 16. We'll break that down all for you today. We'll come back with wide receivers, tight ends, and defenses like we usually do on Matchup Thursday here. So regular week of shows here leading you into the Christmas Eve and Christmas Day weekend of fantasy football, as well as the Jets and Jaguars opening things up on Thursday Night Football. So a lot of good stuff to break down. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. We're free and available to you on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your own football franchise? Then this game is definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the season, lead your team to glory. To download the same game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On. That's Locked On in all caps in the game store. All right, we will dive right into the quarterback rankings. Now, one guy we're a little bit worried about this week. We'll start with that right away. I have him ranked right now, if he plays, at number 4, Jalen Hurts. Unfortunately, he hurt his right shoulder, was able to finish the game against the Bears, but now we had a little bit of a bombshell drop during Monday Night Football from Adam Schefter. We talked a little bit about it on Pickup Tuesday, where Gardner Minshew is on standby to start, and looks like it could be leaning that way. And the Eagles, interesting because they've opened up a 3-game lead with 3 left to play on the Cowboys, so they just have to win one more game here to pull away and get the number 1 seed, lock up the division, all that stuff here. So when you're looking at that, they want to be careful with Hurts. They have some different matchups coming up to close the season here, so this is a game where they might just say, okay, we're going to rest Hurts. We don't want to risk further injury to his shoulder. We can still maybe be competitive in this game, but if we lose this game to the Cowboys, it's not going to be devastating for us, where the Cowboys desperately need this one a little bit more. So I think they're going to err on the side of caution with Jalen Hurts. Let's hope that maybe they'll just say he can go, he's cleared, and he wants to play, and he's a competitive player that is going to play. But we also don't want him hurt for the rest of the playoffs. So it's a little bit of catch-22 here. We're in a limited round of fantasy football where we have maybe 2 weeks left, maybe 3 weeks in a lot of leagues. So it's tough. Maybe this is why a lot of leagues need to have a 2-week kind of championship round or really do a total points for the playoffs. Because, again, this is a tough thing to navigate through. But make sure you get a good backup. Gardner Minshew would be available for you there on a lot of leagues. There, if people are a little bit skeptical against the Cowboys defense, but we just saw it get lit up here by the Texans and Jaguars. So that's your pivot. And if he plays, he's going to be motivated to put Micah Parsons in his place and deliver here. So if not, I think Minshew is going to be playing pretty well and be a valuable streamer in week number 16. All right, number 1 on my list going at quarterback. He will play Josh Allen against the Bears. We saw Hurts in that matchup running all over the Bears. I think Allen can also put up the touchdowns to the air here with his weapon. So Josh Allen, big game against the Dolphins, could really follow that. So he's no problem as a league-winning type quarterback here in fantasy football. Patrick Mahomes against the Seahawks. He can run on the Seahawks, tougher to pass on them, but he'll still get the job done with the necessary numbers. Joe Burrow is on a heater, only 200 yards passing last week, but 4 scores. Patriots just gave up 303 to Derek Carr. So like that with Joe Burrow. Justin Herbert, I know, it was a clunker against the Titans, but two fluky rushing touchdowns. The Titans don't allow much on the ground. Like those turned into two passing touchdowns. You were set to go with Herbert. So touchdowns sometimes a bit fickle, but at home against the Colts, there won't be a negative game script, but we saw Kirk Cousins had a lot of success against that defense last week. Justin Fields, the running alone is worth it, but he's back looking good here after the bye. Really delivered against the Eagles, so love him this week at number 6. Trevor Lawrence, it's hard to sit. I know it's the Jaguars defense against the Jets defense, but looking at it, you cannot sit Trevor Lawrence. He is the QB 7, 6 on the year, depending on your scoring. Well, that's where we have him in the rankings. You just have to trust Trevor Lawrence at this point. His weapons are good. He's had 2 big games in a row. He's just taken over with his talent, just like those other young quarterbacks. So Trevor Lawrence will get the job done here with more of maybe a 252 modest performance against the Jets. But the Jets play that zone type defense, so there should be some openings there for his underneath receivers, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, and the like in that one. Just playing too well to sit right now. Tua Tagovailoa, look, we were skeptical about the Bills matchup. He came through with a couple touchdowns there. He's going to have to throw off of this week because Aaron Rodgers is going to come down to Miami and be pretty active here. So do like Tua Tagovailoa this week. So those are the top 8 quarterbacks that we're looking at in fantasy football. So overall, yeah, good season for some of these young guns. We did like Lawrence and Tagovailoa as a little bit sleepers, as QB2s with QB1 upside. Well, they've both come through here with that this season. We didn't see that from Zach Wilson despite some of the weapons he had. Well, Mike White was pretty decent there. So these young quarterbacks, and we look at them, Burrow, Herbert, Tua, all from the same class here. You got Lawrence delivering and Field. So the young quarterbacks going forward are going to be huge. Jalen Hurts as well with that class from a couple years ago in the second round. So young quarterbacks, young guns, that's the way to go as we make that transition a little bit more. And that we know Allen and Mahomes are kind of the elder statesmen of that group. So love to see that. And these are going to be your fantasy football leaders and assets for a while, not just in this season, not this week, but for quite a while. And we're excited about that, to have this level of quarterback play for fantasy football production. We will get into other guys we're excited about playing, as well as the guys that I do not love this week and you want to avoid in your fantasy football lineups if you can, or see if you have alternatives there. We'll do that in our next segment. We told you at the top that this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by our new gaming sponsor. It's Ultimate Pro Football GM, and it's easy to get into it. It's really the mobile game that everyone's talking about. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and wanted to manage your own football franchise, you can do that. Your dream will come true, and this game is definitely for you with Ultimate Football GM. You can manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the season, lead your team to glory, and you'll get to do a lot of cool things. You're responsible for making sure you hire the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, making a draft picks, and navigating through free agency, and then navigating your franchise through the draft and all the ups and downs of a regular season based on the personnel moves. It's all this challenging, realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is a completely free and playable offline, play on the go as you want and when you want to. I've got into it. I just started and building my team. It's a lot of fun. You get to see these players and how you stack them up on your team and decide, say, do I want this player over this player? To think about age, production, all those type of things, and try to build the ultimate roster there. And it's really fun to play GM, and Ultimate Football GM is going to be the ultimate way to do that. Locked On Fantasy Football listeners will get 100% free boost to their franchise when you use the promo code Locked On. That's in all caps, Locked On in all caps, in the game store within the app. That's Locked On in all caps, so make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's right, ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football here is also brought to you by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we're sure you're going to love. That's why you'll be able to find an episode from the league available as a bonus episode through Locked On NFL Show right here on the network. Narrated by Super Bowl champion and legendary smack talker Richard Sherman and sports broadcaster and rising star Taylor Rooks. The League is an 8-part docuseries about the most bizarre, inspirational, and unlikely stories connected to America's favorite sport, pro football. They also have a nice bonus episode you can check out now. It's called The We of the Cowboy, which is the incredible story of the 1977 Dallas Cowboys brought in Bruce Lee's protege, that's the way, to teach their defense martial arts, ushering in a new approach to the way the league trained. It's a pretty remarkable story, and you can hear that there. Each story that you get on the league offers equal parts history, entertainment, and social commentary from Sherman and Brooks. Head over to Locked On NFL for a bonus episode of the league, or catch the full series wherever you get your podcasts. Available now. Audible, get in the game. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, the biggest stories in sports around the world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's Take of the Day. Locked On Sports Today available on the YouTube app and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's break down the quarterback starts and sits. Then we'll get into my running back rankings of the week here. Lamar Jackson. We'll see if he can return. They said it was a 1 to 4 week absence. It's been 2 weeks here, so potential that he can return this week against the Falcons. It's a great matchup. If you're going to stream Tyler Huntley, this is a better week to do it. I didn't like him against the Steelers. I didn't like him against the Browns, both road games. This is at home against the Atlanta Falcons, and they can be exploited. So Huntley could easily have a couple scores, some good rushing touchdowns here. Jackson is also stepping a good matchup should he return against the Falcons. Kirk Cousins. You look at him, he's on a heater, 2 400-yard games in a row. I don't think he'll get that because I don't think the Giants will create a shootout situation here for Kirky. But when you look at Cousins, he's going to put up the numbers. He's got the weapons. Justin Jefferson, the best fantasy football receiver. You got a little bit KJ Osborne. You still have TJ Hawkinson, Adam Thielen, a lot of weapons there to come through. And we saw Dalvin Cook back in the passing game as well. So a lot of good stuff for Kirk Cousins. Too many weapons, too good of a matchup not to play him. Same thing with Geno Smith. I know Tyler Lockett is going to miss the game, has the finger injury there, fracture. At least one game they'll be careful with. I think there's a good chance Tyler Lockett will only miss one game. He's a pretty tough young dude, well, a little bit older now, but still very tough. So DK Metcalf, Noah Fant, Marquise Goodwin. There's enough weapons here for Geno Smith to put up the numbers you're looking for. You're looking for 252. I think you can get it on the road here with Geno. He's been one of the more consistent floor plays at quarterback all season long, and it was rough against the 49ers, but the Chiefs are not the 49ers defense. Tom Brady, 3 touchdowns there against the Bengals last week and playing from ahead. They should happen to do that again against the Cardinals. So Cardinals pass defense really beat up here and really exploitable here. We saw some success for the Broncos offense, limited offense against that team last week. So I love the Bucs here. Sunday night football in the desert to deliver there. Aaron Rodgers, I love him against the Dolphins this week. It's going to be high volume potentially against Tua on the other side, throwing it all over. You just didn't have to throw a lot of against the Rams, who didn't put up a fight here. But we know the Dolphins, win or lose, are going to put up some points in this one. Aaron Rodgers working around the Xavier Howard matchup is going to light up that secondary. So love Rodgers this week with his young receivers, Christian Watson and Ronald Dobbs. The rookie should have a lot of success. Well, Daniel Jones, the matchup is too good against the Vikings with some help from Saquon Barkley. Jones is on running, putting up some numbers. So I could see him do like a 200 and a touchdown plus like 50 to 60 yards on the ground. And that's your fantasy football streaming purposes here for Daniel Jones in Minnesota. Brock Purdy, multiple touchdowns here every time he's touched the ball and played. So love it. The 49ers have another great matchup at home against the Commanders. Now, the Commanders' defense has gotten a little bit better, but they can be leaking against the run at times. They're usually pretty strong up front, so that's going to help the 49ers on the back end really exploit that Commanders team and put up the numbers there. And Ryan Tannehill, playing off the run, could get the Traylon Burks back with Chig Okonkwo. Like him quite a bit this week there to stream at home against the Texans, and he'll be patient. And Kenny Pickett, I'm hoping he plays because it'll give us another option this week, especially with the Jalen Hurts injury. Gardner Minshew is another person we talked about picking up and trying to plug and play against the Cowboys based on what the results were. But Kenny Pickett, you're looking at him against the Raiders at home. The Raiders have given it all up a lot. Mac Jones was just terrible last week. So I don't like Mitchell Trubisky too much in this one, but Pickett can run and get some numbers here. So this is the best matchup. Should Pickett play, returning from his concussion, the rookie will see all season long based on the team, the opponent, the place, all that stuff here for Week 16. All right, let's get into our quarterbacks I don't like as much this week. Dak Prescott, the Eagles' defense, pretty still nasty against the pass. Prescott is not running enough, and the weapons are limited here. So I'm not feeling Dak. I think they're going to run quite a bit with Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott, try to grind this game out here against the Eagles, especially if Minshew's in there. Jared Goff on the road against a tough defense. No, thank you. Sitting Jared Goff. I think they're going to run well. The Lions are against the Panthers. Derek Carr, big game against the Patriots. I did like him last week because the Patriots defense is in shambles. The Steelers defense is improving. We saw that. So Derek Carr going to be contained. I don't like him this week. I don't like Deshaun Watson. The numbers just haven't been explosive. The Browns offense still kind of grindy, limited here with their weapons and not seeing a lot. I also see a lot of Nick Chubb in this game as their favorite. So kind of want the Browns to trail and be in a bad situation for Watson to put up numbers. The Saints is not one of those numbers. Same thing with Andy Dalton on the other side of this matchup. Low scoring, a lot of running. I think Alvin Kamara versus Nick Chubb is the more intriguing battle. This one, and Matt Ryan, you're not going to go with him. It was a little bit disappointing last week for sure. They had the rushing attack, they had the special teams and defensive touchdown. So Matt Ryan just is a guy that we just want to avoid now here last 3 weeks of the season. So there you have the quarterback starts and sits. Let's get into the running back rankings. Got to start with Derrick Henry. He came through big time against the Chargers, and he also was awesome as a pass catcher. That can happen again against the Texans, the cover 2 zone defense. So Derrick Henry's number 1. Christian McCaffrey, close second against the Commanders at home. Austin Eckler there just brings it every week. And running, catching passes doesn't matter. He's kind of the Jalen Hurts of running back. So at home against the Colts, I love that matchup. Dalvin Cook, speaking of Colts, he smashed them last week with 95 rushing, 95 receiving, and that long touchdown that ended up tying the game. Gets the Giants this week. The Giants' run defense stinks. So the Vikings' run defense not very good. Saquon Barkley on the other side of the game with volume as well. Najee Harris looked good now. He's finishing really the season strong after some of that early season disappointment. Gets the Raiders at home. They got banged up by Ramondre Stevenson last week to a big game. So Najee is in the top 10 this week. Nick Chubb. We want Chubb to go off a little bit more, not getting the touchdowns. We're not exploding for those big yards that we're looking for. I think this is one of those games as the Saints are coming off of giving up a lot of yardage to the Falcons on the ground. Aaron Jones on fire here, led the team in rushing, scored a touchdown. Could have scored a second one for the Packers on Monday night before they were running out the clock. But yeah, I do like him at number 8. Alvin Kamara, this is a good matchup as well. The Browns' run defense pretty weak here. We saw good performance by J.K. Dobbins on the ground. Ramondre Stevenson probably going to get the backfield to himself with Damien Harris. I thought Damien Harris was going to play last week, but Stevenson was the one that played well, gets the Bengals at home this week. Kenneth Walker, love that. Hopefully the game script won't get too negative and they'll involve him enough in the passing game here, but Walker can run on the Chiefs. James Conner has been very effective the past couple of weeks with the quarterback change. They're relying a lot on the running game. The Bucs run defense was Vita Vea last week. They were pretty contained against the Bengals, but James Conner just getting too much volume and high leverage situations to not play him. Josh Jacobs, I have him down at 13 this week, out of the RB1 status. Again, the Steelers really shut down the Panthers last week, so I'm a little bit worried about that. Tony Pollard, Ezekiel Elliott with that split 14 and 15. Joe Mixon, a little bit conservative with him as well with a disappointing game. So I'm going with 16. Miles Sanders, same thing. Being cautious there. He had the clunker last week against the Bears. I think that says he's going to rebound this week against the Cowboys. J.K. Dobbins, great spot at home against the Falcons. David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert will be in that mix for the Bills, but he comes in at number 19. Travis Etienne and Zonovan Knight back-to-back on Thursday Night Football. Those are the guys that are touching the ball the most for either team. Getting those touches, volume, you've got to play them. Even if the matchup might seem a little bit difficult, I think it's an easier matchup for Knight than Etienne, but Etienne looked really good last week against the Cowboys. A.J. Dillon getting his late season closer role, had 2 touchdowns against the Rams on Monday night there, so he's feeling it here. So looking at it with the Dolphins' run defense, a little bit wilty. They can give it up to 2 backs here, as we saw last week. Naeem Hines and James Cook scored, so good opportunity there for Dillon and Jones this week. They got the Dolphins, Latavius Murray, too much volume, too much production, not to play here. Even in a tough matchup at home against the Rams. And Cam Akers, same deal. Tough matchup on the road against the Broncos, but we do like that. Actually, this game is in Los Angeles. So when you look at Latavius Murray and Cam Akers, same game, they're just getting too many touches to ignore. And sometimes that's the most important thing in fantasy football. All right, so there's your look at your running back rankings. Those are the top 24 that no-brainer plays. So your RBs 1 and 2, if you're thinking about flex or deeper leagues and you don't have all these guys and you're looking to make that call between the tougher ones, we'll talk about it in our final segment. We'll look at duos this week. So a lot of duos that have interesting matchups, good or bad, that we'll break down for you in our final segment here on Matchup Wednesday and Locked On Fantasy Football. This holiday, find what you love at Total Wine and More. With so many great bottles to choose from, it's easy to find new favorite single barrel bourbon or the perfect gift for everyone on your list with some help from a friendly guide. And with all the confidence of knowing you found something special for the lowest price, love what you find. Only at Total Wine and More, curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly. Be 21. All right, it is time to close the show of Matchup Wednesday here at Locked On Fantasy Football. We'll have Matchup Thursday up for you a little bit later than usual there on Thursday, but it'll be out there for you, so check it out. And we will go and finish with that here on the show. So let's break it down here in our final segment and look at that as we look at the running back starts and sits here for the week. Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon are the ones you want to go with here against the Seahawks. That red-hot duo, McKinnon especially, is on fire. So good stuff there with the Chiefs duo against the Seahawks. You have Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. there for the Dolphins. A good matchup at home against the Packers here. So good timing for that matchup. So Wilson should return with a hip injury this week. That's the expectation that Mike McDaniel, the coach, does have here for the team. You got Devin Singletary and James Cook here. And looking at that matchup against the Bears, we saw the Eagles struggle a little bit with that, but I think the Bills are leading a little bit more on the run. They like their backs here. I'm not going to extend Naeem Hines, but that combination is very good this week. DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams step into the Panthers matchup. They really struggle against the duo of Najee Harris and Jalen Warren last week. So that's how you beat the Panthers. You run on them all the time, and that's what they're going to do there with that Detroit duo. Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White are two guys that you're looking at here for sure. With that matchup, the Cardinals really got gashed last week by Latavius Murray and the Broncos. Fournette and White getting interchangeable work. Sometimes it comes down to he gets a few more catches and the touchdown, but still, how I'm breaking these down, whoever I have first with Pacheco and Mostert, Singletary, Swift, Fournette, that's a guy I'm looking at more as an RB2. McKinnon, again, I love McKinnon, but I think the heater could slow down a little bit. So all these guys are RB2 flex options as we're looking at here. And Zach Moss and Deion Jackson, again, Zach Moss is the power back, and the Chargers do struggle against those type of players. They also struggle against receiving backs, as we saw with Derrick Henry. So Deion Jackson also having some appeal in that one. So splitting it up, giving a little bit more depth at running back this week, but plenty of flex options that are positive from this position. Now, a few duos we do not like this week. Brian Robinson Jr. and Antonio Gibson, they're running into the 49ers run defense. Good night, forget it. Gibson was terrible last week. Robinson was very good against the Giants, but that was the Giants, a really weak run defense. This is not the same matchup this week there for the Commanders. So, nope. I'm not saying hello to the Falcons either. They're splitting the backfield with Tyler Algier. Cordarrelle Patterson, they were very productive against the Saints, but the Ravens run defense pretty nasty. Nick Chubb did his best to get to 100, couldn't quite get there last week. So Ravens, pretty empty set, low-scoring game potential for the Falcons. Dante Foreman, Chuba Hubbard. Lions run defense, sneaky good or better. They really shut down Zonovan Knight, so that was a good performance last week. Limited offense, I think it's a little bit easier for the Lions to do that. That's what happened with Zach Wilson. That's what can happen with the former Jets quarterback Sam Darnold this week, and Rex Burkhead, Royce Freeman. You can throw in Dario Wally. We're not trusting any Texans running back in that brutal matchup against the Titans. So some really bad matchups for these duos, but a lot of duos have favorable matchups. So a lot of depth and positivity at running back this week if you're looking for that position and filling it in. If you don't have Jonathan Taylor, you have options. You have other guys that are a little bit questionable. You got options as well this week in your fantasy football lineups. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. Now make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today podcast available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. So good luck. A lot of things to work out through with quarterbacks and running backs this week. Again, biggest injuries we're looking to address here, Jalen Hurts and Jonathan Taylor. So a lot of options there. Don't overplay your hand. Go with the guys that got you there here. And look, when we go sits, it's more a recommendation. Sometimes you're stuck with that player and you got to play them. But that's why we want to expand and give you the no-brainer plays this week a little bit more, give you deep into the decisions here with the RB and QBs where we are set up there. So that's what we're doing here on Locked On Fantasy Football. And we'll do the same with wide receivers, tight ends, and defenses for you tomorrow on Matchup Thursday. It'll be up a little bit later tomorrow, but we'll have it good for you to go ahead of week number 16 of the Thursday night game for sure to know what wide receivers and tight ends to play in that one. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer. Have a great rest of your day. We'll check you out for Matchup Thursday tomorrow.